vSphere data protection backups. When creating backup jobs, we can backup the entire virtual machine. We can also backup the individual VM decay for a VM, or we could backup an entire container. So that container could be a data center, cluster, or a resource pool. So let's say we set up a backup job on a container, and later we add a VM to that container. That VM would be automatically backed up. Same logic applies if we were to remove that VM from the container. It will no longer be captured in that particular backup job. Okay, so once a backup job is created, we can clone that job to easily duplicate the settings pertaining to um, that particular job, like our backup schedule or retention policies. So we don't necessarily need to recreate all of that. Our final point here, we have CBT, or change block tracking. So the initial backup job would normally take some time, since all the data blocks that makes up that particular VM would need to be captured in the backup. So all subsequent backup on the same VM will take less time, since we'll be utilizing vSphere data protection, we'll be utilizing the vSphere change block tracking capabilities. So VDP will just utilize that CBT capability in vSphere to just track the blocks that would have changed from the previous backup. We can also use the replication feature in VDP to replicate or backed up data to another VDP appliance, or to EMC Alphamar. So this is useful if we need to move a copy of our backups offline. So because the data is deduplicated here at both the source and the target site, only the unique data segments would be replicated. Okay, so once we get to our vSphere web client, we'll go through setting up of vSphere, our VDP replication. Also, this data that is replicated, it is encrypted and compressed, so it's more secure, and also it minimizes the network bandwidth consumption there. This would be especially useful if we are replicating the data to another VDP appliance over the internet. Okay. What we can do to set up a many-to-one replication, or I should say one-to-many. So let's just say we have site A, site B, and site C. We can replicate VM from site A to site B, and then taking the replicated data from site B and replicating a copy to site C. So basically, this approach would allow us to keep the replicated backup at multiple sites for disaster recovery purposes. We would not be demonstrating that when we get to our vSphere web client, since my login infrastructure here does not support that number of VMs. Application backup. We can also use VDP to backup and restore the individual databases on Exchange, SQL, and SharePoint databases. So for this to be successful, we'll first need to install the VDP appliance agent. So the agents would basically allow for application consistent backup and recovery for databases, as well as to provide the options for doing a full differential and incremental backup. So we'll take a look at all of this once we get to our vSphere web client. Now that we covered the theoretical part here, let me just pull up my vSphere web client and we'll get right into the demonstration. Okay, I'll go over to VDP. Okay, so before we go into setting up of our backup jobs, okay, let me just fix this before we continue. I just need to reload this. Kind of maxing out my resources here, so let me take a look, see if I can shut some of my VM off or put them offline. Okay, so I just had to power off a couple of VMs in my infrastructure here. I was running a bit low on my memory. So let's continue here. I'll connect back to this VDP appliance. This should take a couple seconds. Okay, so before I get into the backup tab where we'll create or set up our backup jobs, I just want you guys to have a look at this option here, download application backup client. So if I was to click on this here, this would give me my different clients that I would need to install in my infrastructure. So let's take a look at my infrastructure here. I have my, let me just go back to host and cluster view. I have a Linux VM and I have a SQL or a SQL server here. So this is running the SQL agent. So let me just go over back to VDP. So once I click here, I have these different agents that I could install on my Exchange SQL or SharePoint server. So I have the 64-bit of SQL here. So I would have downloaded this agent. So once I click on that here, it'll just download here, and then I would have moved this over to my SQL server and install it. But that's for the application backup. We'll get to that in a little bit. So if you want to back up the individual databases, you'll need to do that. But we'll get to that. Let me just pull up my backup tab here. So in here, I have the option here, backup job action. So I want to create a new backup job. And we'll come to backup verification in a little bit. So let me just create new. And here I can back up the entire VM or select the individual disks within that, or I could back up applications. So let's do this option first, and then we'll come back to applications. So just hit on next here. So I have the option here, if I had multiple disks here, I could select the disk within the particular VM that I'm trying to back up. So in this case here, we're working with the Linux VM. So we could, if we had multiple VMDK, could select the individual one here. So I'll just go back. So I need to do a full image of the Linux VM. I'll just hit next. Recall I mentioned when we were going through the slides, we could do containers too. So this is a resource pool that I have here. I could do that, or I could select the entire data center if I had a cluster set up here. So I'll select this Linux VM here and then hit on next. So I have my schedule here, daily, weekly, or if I need to do like first Sunday of every month, and then I have my start time for the backup job. So I'll just leave the default since we're just testing this. I hit the next here. I have the retention policy, how long I want to keep this image for. So by default 60 days, so I'll just leave that there. I could just do forever, so it would not be deleted. So I'll just do 60 days, leave the default, and then hit on next. So I'll give this a name. Let's call this um let's call this Linux 01. Okay, if I can spell this correct. Okay, so I'll just give that the name there, hit on next. And then here I'll just hit on finish. It just give us a little summary with the schedule and the retention policy here. And then the destination appliance that it will be stored on. I'll just go ahead and hit on finish here. So this was created, this backup job. What I can do now is select this job here. If you notice, it says never here, never for the last time this was started. So what I can do is hit backup now, and this will immediately start this backup job. Okay, so let's do the application backup job. So I'll go back here. Let's select new. And recall I mentioned previously too, we could clone the backup job. So we could just hit the clone here and clone the settings, like the retention policies from this backup job. So I'll go ahead and create a new one. But in this one here, I want to demonstrate backing up of the application or a database. So I would have downloaded that SQL agent and install it on my SQL server. So I can just go to application now and hit on next. So we can do full server or select the individual databases. So I'll do that, and this will do a scan. So when I install the SQL agent on my SQL server, I just it was a simple installation. Just hit next, next, and just enter the IP address of the VDP or the vSphere Data Protection Appliance. So that's all that is required from the agent end. And then this would go out and scan for the agent. So here, if I go Microsoft SQL Server here, this is my SQL Server, and then I could select the particular database that I'm trying to back up. So this will just go out and scan. So if I had multiple databases here, I could just go and select the one that I want to capture in this backup job. So I can just select, let's just say the master there, and just hit on next. The same thing here, the schedule, we have full differential or incremental backup. The type, I could enable a multi-stream backup. Okay, I have some other options for recovery and my database log here. So I'll just leave those to default, and then I'll just continue. Similar settings here for schedule. I'll just move on from here. Leave this retention policy for 60 days. Hit on next. And let's just call this SQL database. So this will just take a couple seconds. We wouldn't run this backup right now. What I want to do is demonstrate a backup verification, but for us to do that, I'll need a full copy of one of my backup with the VMware tools install. So what I'll do is set up another backup job where we back up the entire SQL server. So if we go here, we could this is one I had from previously. Let me just delete this. So okay, so I just delete that. So for us to create a backup verification job, we'll need a VM with the VM where tools installed. So let me just create a full backup job and then we'll come back to this. So go for back here and we'll create a new one. So we're doing the entire image here, entire VM full image, and let's call this one okay, well, let's select the VM first. So we're working with the SQL server. So we'll call this one backup. So I do want to run this one, so I'll just run this and then we'll come back to the backup verification. Before I run this, another thing, what we can also do is go directly on the VM and run the backup. So once we have a job associated with this particular VM, we could just right click here and come to all VDP's action at the bottom. We could backup, run the backup right now, or we could do a restore rehearsal. Just do a restore and test that there. But we could go ahead and back this up now. Or let's say I selected, let's just rename this. And this is one that I restored previously, but let me just rename this. Let's just say this is Linux 2. Okay, so Linux 2 here, this particular VM is not associated in any backup job. So if I was to right click this here and go to all VDP action, I wouldn't have any actions available here since this VM is not part of any backup jobs. Okay, so let me go back to VDP here and then we'll run a full backup on the SQL server. So once I run this and this is completed, then we'll come back to the backup verification. So I'll just run backup now, and we could just do the out of date sources or from all source. I'll just select all sources now. This should start any moment here. Okay, so this would go ahead now and run a backup. This would take quite a bit. So what I'll do is just pause the record in here. Once this is completed, we'll continue from here and then we'll work with our backup verification. Okay, so now that my backup job uh, is completed here, I can run the backup verification job. So let's go across there and create a new backup verification job. So it found that we have a backup already here, SQL, sorry. So I'll just hit on next. So if we needed to run a verification script after doing the backup verification, we could include that here. So let me just do it next. Um, and this is a destination where I want to deploy this backup. So let me just choose here. So I'll just let me see where I can store this. I'll just leave this at my ESXi 5. So ideally you'd want to run this on a separate host and then test this out. So I'll just leave this here. So same thing here, I have my schedule. I'll just leave the default, go ahead and hit next. And let's just give this a name. Okay, so now that we have this backup verification job created, based on the schedule here, we could have this automatically deploy this backup on the particular host that we would have selected, and it's basically doing a test restore of this. So we'll go ahead and restore the VM and just test the integrity of that, and then finally it would delete this the backup data that it would have used during the restore operation. Okay, so I'm not going to run this now. This would take a while, but at least we have an idea now how we can create that. The next thing I wanted to demonstrate here is replication. And in the following module, we'll come over back to our restore tab and work with that. But for replication, similarly here, we can create a job here over on the right. So this would create a new replication job. So here I'll just select guest image and just hit on next. I don't have a second VDP appliance configured where I can point this to, but basically this is how we'll go through this to set up a replication job. So I'll just select all client for now. Schedule, we could set this up here. So here's where if you had a second VDP appliance that you're pushing this job to, or this VM replication to, we'll enter that here, and the IP or the host name for your VDP appliances, and then the credentials for that. So schedule retention, we'll give it a name, and that would be it. But I wouldn't continue here since I don't have a second VDP appliance. So I'll just cancel out of this. So this is basically all I wanted to demonstrate in this module. Before I close off here, let's just take a look at the reports tab here. So this would give you a quick idea of what's going on with your backups verification, your replication jobs, okay, and your total protected VMs. You'll see your failures here. You'll get some details on your job. Then you'll have your unprotected clients, those that are not protected with the infrastructure. Okay, so we have a little summary here. I can show the backup verification report or the replication report if I had that going on here. So this is basically giving me an idea too of those VMs that are not included in a backup or replication job.